Hello and welcome back to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP, and in this video we're going to be doing our first ever video whiskey review. We've already written a couple, but this is the first time it's on camera, and we're going to be using the Bespoke Unit Viscometric, a quantifiable review sheet that you can use at home. Just look below and there is a link to download your own blank copy. Of course, what whiskey are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to be doing one of my favourites, so this is going to be a very objective assessment. This is the Laphroaig 10-year-old single malt. If you're already a regular reader on Bespoke Unit, then you will know that I do have a sweet spot for Laphroaig. We've already done a detailed distillery overview, which you can see in the link below, which covers the history and their manufacturing process, which most of it I learned on a visit there on site, as well as a review of their Carchus Pheno, which was the 2018 version when I became a member of the Friends of Laphroaig, which, by the way, you can become a member too. You just have to, with any Laphroaig purchase, you get a little passport here, you get your own square foot of land, and you also get a couple of discounts when you put on the codes of your following bottles every time you buy one. So first things first is we're going to take a look at the Robe. As you can see, I'm using a glass here which I got for my birthday last week. It is a Peugeot Impitoyable, which I'm going to be reviewing next week because I really like it. And we're going to use this now to take a look at the Robe. So here we're looking at sort of an aged Sauternes colour, sort of medium light caramel, and in terms of clarity it's very crisp with, well, let's have a look at the whiskey legs and the viscometric potential. So the whiskey legs are quite thin, quite fast, and we do get some viscometric whirls when you add a little bit of water, which shows that it is a non-chill filtration. Overall, it seems to be quite a light-hearted whiskey. Let's see what we get in the next step. Following the Viscometric, what do we got next? We have the nose. So we're going to be taking a nice big whiff of this. Now, I'm not going to pretend this is my first time trying it. I love this whiskey. As you can see, I have consumed rather a lot. This is not my first bottle either. Probably my fourth in recent memory. Don't judge me. So we're looking at quite an intense bouquet here that is not too complex. It's not linear either. We've got something definitely going on with a not overly diverse spectrum of notes, and that is though very vivid and easily understandable. In terms of nose feel, it's quite peppery, and in notes we get a little bit of brine, a little bit of seaweed. So we've got this kind of very seaside notes about it, which is kind of reminiscent of the coastal location on the Isle of Islay. And we have a little bit of peat. When I say a little bit, I mean a lot of peat. This is a very peaty whiskey with a sweet, bitter following of licorice, which just kind of comes in there and oozes its way up the sinuses and back out the mouth again. Next step is the palate. Well, before we get there, let's just say that as much as I am a fan of very picturesque imagery, and I do want to be featured in Laphroaig's Opinion Matters advertising campaign, I'm not very confident with my words when I'm on camera. I tend to be a little bit hesitant, I stutter, you know, I'm a wordsmith when actually writing. Although, I can't say I don't mind being in front of the camera every now and then. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Basically, this is going to be pretty straightforward. Okay, I'll swallow now, sorry. I'm really enjoying that. So in terms of primary flavours, we're looking at something that's this interesting duality of sweet and salty, with a very peppery, quite a furry mouthfeel. Furry because it's got this kind of dry, coagulating effect that basically beads off your saliva across the palate and gives it this very furry texture afterwards. In terms of the opening, it's very sort of medicinal, so we've got this TCP note to it, which is very kind of not overwhelming or burdensome, but it's there, it's looming over the other notes. We have some dried fig, this really nice little fruity sweetness. It just kind of echoes in the background and goes, hey, cooey, but it kind of gets crushed by the cordite, which is this sort of gunpowder, recently fired gunpowder note, which is quite smoky, almost a little bit slaty in there as well. So that's the opening, and then we transition to the heart, which is kind of, it's more spicy. You've got some cardamom in there, quite overt aniseed as well, so it's a little bit sharp in the spiciness, followed by some charred coal. So if you can imagine a coal fire, you're starting to get towards the end, the ashes, the embers, you're looking at something around about that. So now let's talk about the finish. So we have not an overly long, but a relatively lingering finish here, with some very rich and full notes. We have primarily what I like to associate with smouldering rubble, so almost like the morning after a distillery was burnt down to the ground, and during the night it rained as well, so it's really smoky and kind of out there. And then some smoke kipper, which really echoes back to that brine and sort of seaweed note we had in the nose, with the smokiness as well. So for me, it's this kind of almost quite an old smoke kipper as well. It's been sitting around for a couple of days. It's been overly smoked as well. It's very overt, followed by a note that I really like in fragrance, which is birch tar. So there you have it. That's my interpretation of this expression. Of course, everyone's experience will be different. This is based on my written review on the notes here, where I also added a little bit of water, not in this video but in the written review, to really compare and see how those aromas came out. When it comes to diluting it, I've had a lot of arguments with Bespoke Unit's whiskey editor, Robert. I personally like to dilute a fair bit to not get that alcohol bloom, not get that sort of overwhelming sensation, and really be able to enjoy the nuances and the aromas that are sort of hidden away inside the whiskey. But he'll prefer it when you're a lot more restrained on the water, if you do it at all, because he prefers that fuller flavour. At least I'm paraphrasing for him there. Next, let's talk about the overall experience. Well, first of all, I really love the presentation of Laphroaig's bottles. I love this white background with a matte paper and the black text. The white background and the black text is quite reminiscent of the distillery itself and the architecture on Islay, which is all these white buildings that use a type of lime, which basically, if I understand correctly, prevents the humidity and the rising damp inside the houses, and then they stencil building names on the side because it can be seen from the sea, I presume, which is very visible. So it really is a great homage to its heritage. We also have a cheeky little royal warrant up there, which was awarded by the Prince of Wales back, I think, in 94, was it 96? No, I think it was 94, when he visited it, and visited it for a couple of hours longer than planned because his plane had a wee accident on the landing. Packaging is a classic tube, really echoing what's on the label as well, with these green stripes at the top and bottom. Not too different to the tie I'm wearing, so I like to think that I've planned this ahead, which I didn't at all. And you also get a lovely landscape of the front of the distillery itself, which, yeah, kind of looks like that. Yeah, it's kind of stylized, let's say, but the distillery is actually a beautiful sight indeed. In terms of cork quality, it's a great cork. Seems to work fine, prevents any, I haven't noticed any evaporation. Well, actually, I'd like to claim I have seen a lot of evaporation, but that's actually just me having a wee nip when no one's looking, not an alcoholic. And we have this nice cap on it with a stenciled still, which kind of again echoes to the style of the rest of the bottle. In terms of occasion, this is a very versatile whiskey that you could probably enjoy alone, casually among friends, or even bring out for more formal occasions. It's a very divisive expression that is well known for its love or hate relationship with the public, and they kind of embrace that. This is really something that you could use it in most occasions, as long as you have another option for those who aren't a fan of its overly peaty and spicy attitude. Finally, value for money is extraordinary. I picked this bottle up in France for around 30 euros, which comes to $35 at the time of doing this video, and the RRP is probably around 50 thereabouts. You could probably find it though not far from around the $30 to $40 range. There's a link below on where you can grab yourself a cheeky bottle. And finally, pairings. Because this is quite a very characterful, very rich whiskey, it's going to be difficult on pairing it with dishes if that's your thing, or with snacks, but I find it goes very well with a very dark chocolate. Otherwise you could consider having it with some char-grilled red meat, but really char-grilled, like seared on both sides, because you have that kind of smoky, carcinogenic flavour that would really complement well this peatiness that you have in this whisky. Otherwise, smoked seafood, like I mentioned, the finish was kind of on the smoked kipper side, as well as the nose. It's quite briny. I think it would go quite well with something like one of those smokies, which is I don't know if it's something you can get in the US. I'd never seen it before, but when I was in Scotland last, they did have these smokies, which is quite a cheap, very smoked fish that has probably been smoked for days on end and is very rich in that smoky flavour. Would go wonderfully with this. In terms of cigars, as you can see, I do have a cigar here that I'm actually going to, now I'm wrapping up for the day, under the sun and probably burn to a crisp, but I'm going to enjoy myself, pour myself another dram and have a Churchill, as I like to call it, a Davidoff Churchill, the late hour Churchill, which is a very full-bodied cigar that has a very rich flavour. We've reviewed that, I think, a long time ago, but we reviewed it nonetheless. There's a link below for that. Otherwise, what the kind of cigar I would recommend with this would be something that's definitely full-bodied, maybe a Maduro, quite matured, very thick tobacco, something that would complement well the flavour, but there wouldn't be too much of a contrast. So nothing too light-bodied where it would just be dominated by the whiskey, but probably something you want that is quite on the full end of the spectrum. Yep. So to conclude, the Laphroaig Single Malt 10-year-old was our first whiskey review on video, so I'm pretty chuffed that it happened to be our first. As I said, it's one of my favourites. To conclude, love it or loathe it, it is probably one of the most iconic, if not the most famous whiskey in the world, but definitely one of the most iconic Scotch whiskies, and probably Islay's most cherished or most well-known whiskey to boot. It is a great expression. Whether you love it or you hate it, you have most likely heard about it, even if you only have a passing interest in whiskey. I would definitely think that any whiskey collector of any extent needs to have really a bottle at home. This is the kind of basic, most fundamental whiskies. Is it a beginner's whiskey? Most people argue no, but then again, I think that it gives you such a rich introduction into this peatiness that is definitely something that you should consider if you're only starting out. That's all I'm going to say on it. If you want to learn more, I've given a much more detailed written review, which is, as I mentioned several times, linked below. If you want to see more of us, hit that subscribe. We'd love to hear from you, so leave some comments, and don't forget to like that smash button if you enjoyed it, and avoid that dislike button entirely. Just, send us an angry email or something. It'd be much more effective. Really, we don't want dislikes here. Otherwise, you can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, links below to those, and head to our website, leave us a comment on there to say that you came from YouTube, and we'll say thank you very much. That's all from me today. Take care.